The first day I had paella and uttered, which has now gone down in sort of history, family folklore, the infamous words, "I was born to be Spanish." The next morning woke up completely ill, having had the very bad prawns and was sick for the entire trip. We were filming with real tigers, and we filmed some of the time in Paris, and then for about a month and a half or maybe even 2 months we were in Cambodia. Whereas Vancouver, you have to change the way that you live in order to embrace it. My other thing that I, just looking back at that, I feel it's probably the only place in some ways that I don't want to go back to, just because it was such a perfect time and a perfect memory that you almost feel it will never live up to what it was to you before.
Welcome to Travel Secrets with me, Tanya Rose, the podcast sharing wisdom for fellow travellers. Each week, I ask my guests to reveal their 6 travel secrets and the holidays and adventures that surround them. I would just like to say thank you to Mason Rose, the sales and communication agency that represents some of the finest hotels around the world, for partnering with Travel Secrets, the podcast. Today, my guest is the wonderful British actor Freddie Highmore, who shot to fame in Finding Neverland, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, Spiderwick Chronicles, The Golden Compass. My favourite film you did, though, was A Good Year, because as I told you before, Albert Finney was a very close friend. So you must have had the best time in Provence filming with him.
It was absolutely amazing. He was brilliant. And I think the two of us, me as my, very young 11, 12-year-old self, and him with a little bit more awareness of the world, I think the two of us were equally charmed by just getting to film there. And we were staying in this hotel up on the cliff and Gourd nearby, and it was a brilliant time.
Well, he was my son's godfather, and he was absolutely wonderful. My son wants to be an actor, so he was always saying to him, "Why do you want to be an actor? Do you want to be celebrity?" And my son was like, "I don't know what the question is. I want to act because I love acting." And he said, "Yes, that's the right answer." So he had good, moral compass. He knew what he was doing.
Very much so. And I feel also just during filming itself, he sort of became that character in showing me, I got to drink wine and taste a cigar for the first time, and all of these things in the film. And he was like, "Oh, go on, have a little bit and see what it's like." Exactly.
At least, hopefully, it was the vin perdu or whatever the good one was, yes, not the crappy one.
No, it was all excellent.
All excellent wine. So after you did all your childhood things, you then went to Cambridge and you got a double first in Arabic and Spanish.
That's right. It's very excellent.
Madrid,
work.
I'm sure, is something that we'll talk about. And then obviously off to Vancouver, you went to do Bates Motel and then The Good Doctor, which is just sensational. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a mad sort of 12 years, I guess, between 5 years on Bates Motel and 7 years on The Good Doctor, and both of those filming in Vancouver. I've spent most of my adult life over there.
I'm sure you've got some great tips for us Vancouver.
I may do.
I'm sure you do. And now you have The Assassin coming out, so yes, that will be exciting for you to be back in the UK. Although it was filmed in Greece, I think, wasn't it?
It was, but it still feels quite British. It feels like there's a real British sensibility to it in terms of the sense of humour. It doesn't, it's a sort of thriller. Keely Hawes is in it with me, and she plays a sort of ex, but potentially needing to get back into assassin. And yeah, we had a great time. It's the sort of thriller, high stakes drive, but really it's a story between a mother and son. And
it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
and Keely was on the podcast, which you know, and have listened to, and she was great fun. So let's get into your travel secrets. But before we do, perhaps you can just tell us a bit about yourself and how travel has impacted the person that you have become.
I think even just from what you were saying, and we can talk about this more later too, the fact I'd always been interested in languages. I did languages at university, but sort of French and Spanish at school especially were, from an early age, just the things that I gravitated towards and I was excited by. And I think then the opportunity to travel and go to these places where you were useless at the language, but still kind of enjoying trying it anyway and finding that as a way to just access culture and feel it just felt like those trips and travel was so much more fulfilling when you had that insight that speaking the language gives you.
And when you were filming, because you filmed from a very young age and obviously went to places to film, I mean, had you been on holidays before that, or was that your first, trips abroad and things?
A few trips to Europe, but certainly I think the thing with acting, and that I got, as you were saying, from a very young age, is you get to live in these places. And so, I was able to, some things filmed in London, you could go home and that was wonderful, but I was also filming in New York and Montreal and Cambodia, which is something I want to talk to you about, and Provence, as we've already said. And you get to spend more than just that weekend or week's holiday somewhere. You get to spend potentially several months. And so there's an element of work, but it's also an element of holiday just in the exploration of this new place. And I found that actually particularly with Athens last year, the show that Keely and I were doing, it felt like a city where you need to have more than a few days in order to properly experience it and to find those restaurants that excite you more than others. And that's the great luck, I guess, that I feel I've had with acting, is being able to be in so many different places.
And get under the skin of that destination.
Exactly.
And your father used to travel with you because you were obviously very young. So he used to come on set, did he? And come away for a couple of months with you whenever you were filming?
Yes. I think it was probably sensible not to let me at,
12,
14 years old off to the other side of the world with someone that I'd never met before. But no, those memories that we have, and obviously, family, everyone would visit, and just these magical times. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Well, let's get into your travel secrets then. So what's the number one destination you think everyone should go to once in their lifetime?
Well, this may come as no surprise.
I know what you're going to say.
But having spent 12 years of my life in Vancouver, I'm going to say not just Vancouver, but Vancouver and British Columbia more generally. It's just such a magical place. And I think anyone who knows me who may be listening to this is also like, yes, we know, Freddie, you are really obsessed with British Columbia. I always get my map out on the phone. I'm like, oh, you can go to this place and this place and like do this and go here and here. So it's just, the city itself, I think, having grown up in London, I sort of arrived with a expectation of Vancouver, sort of finding in Vancouver the things that I loved in London and sort of transplanting it. And actually you realize quite quickly that Vancouver isn't this large city in the way that London is. It's not as obviously maybe culturally rich in the way that I was lucky enough to get accustomed to, as we were talking about before, with like films and theatre, and you feel like you're at the center of things in London. Whereas Vancouver, you have to change the way that you live in order to embrace it. And by that, I think it's getting out and being in nature and realizing that you're in this city that's on the water with this seawall that surrounds it, these amazing forests that just rise up instantly. The mountains, the water, whales go by, bears are there. It's absolutely stunning. And also so quickly you can leave the city, which is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small city, especially for a city that you feel like you know and that you've heard of as a big place. And so quickly you're just out in the wilderness, in the middle of nothing. Yeah.
How lovely. So what are your top tips for that?
Well, in terms of getting out of Vancouver, there's a couple of places that I feel people should definitely go. One is Vancouver Island, and on the far west coast, you can drive all the way over, sort of take a ferry and drive over the other side. And there's a place called Tofino with this magical hotel that's on the water on Chesterman Beach, which is this absolutely stunning beach that you can surf on, but also just sit by a cozy fire and look out and enjoy, called the Wickeninish Inn. And that's a bit of an institution and has been there for quite some time in Tofino. And then just down the road on the west coast, there's a little village called Ucluelet, or Yuki, as the locals like to call it, which is maybe a little bit cooler and a bit more of a discovery. And there's this restaurant that I was lucky enough to go to called Pluvio, where you can also stay, and that was amazing. The food was great, and it's just these few little rooms above an inn.
That sounds
and that's
amazing.
magical.
That sounds really beautiful.
And then the Sunshine Coast as well, which is maybe a little bit less known than Vancouver Island and is smaller, and there's less. There are a few places that you can stay, but even just for a day trip from Vancouver, you can jump on the ferry and you get off and you just feel immediately, even in those 45 minutes of being on the ferry, that you just arrived in this place where time just slows down and sleepy little villages and towns with the water rising.
That sounds
out.
so beautiful. So you spent 12 years there. So did you do 6 years on Bates?
It was 5 on Bates and then 7 on The Good Doctor.
Yeah. And so were you filming all week and then you had weekends off, or you had time in between?
Exactly. And then just trying to make the most of it. And I would say, whale watching, especially around sort of September out in the Strait of Georgia, just by Vancouver, can be pretty spectacular. And if you go out in a sort of small little boat, you are almost guaranteed, or it feels like that in my experience, to see these humpback whales just going by. And it's the silence of being out there and the stillness on a quiet day. And suddenly that was the whale surfaces and goes past. And it's just the most magical place.
So was it coincidental that you did both back to back? And they were both in the same place? They weren't the same director? Or?
No, completely different.
Really?
And actually finishing Bates Motel, it was, very much coming back to London and telling friends, I've done my time away. I've done my 5 years abroad. Like, I'm coming back soon. And then I returned, and then the pilot of The Good Doctor started, and then quite quickly the show was picked up, and some people were like, oh, I didn't even realize you'd come back. I guess you're off to Vancouver again.
How extraordinary though, isn't it, that you spent that much time there? I mean, it
so
sounds
much does film
anyway.
there.
Do they?
And so there's a lot, I think, after LA and New York, or at least it was at the time, it's the kind of third biggest production hub in North America. But yeah, it's a lovely place to be. I can't speak highly enough of it.
Well, that's great.
I could talk to you the entire time about Vancouver. And you know what?
No one else has mentioned it, so that's
really?
fantastic.
Okay, great.
That's great. Everyone says Venice, Venice, Venice. So
I haven't been to Venice. Venice is on my list.
Definitely.
It's like high up there. Yeah.
So beautiful. What is your most unexpected travel tale?
So I hinted at this earlier. When I was younger, I got to be a part of this film called Two Brothers, which Jean-Jacques Annaud directed, and the two brothers were two tigers. And we were filming with real tigers, and we filmed some of the time in Paris, and then for about a month and a half, or maybe even 2 months, we were in Cambodia. It was amazing to be out in the wilderness. It was this place called Mondulkiri that was an 8-hour drive sort of off the tourist trail on like a bumpy road, or you could take a old military plane that we did on the way back, but it drops sort of, it's unpressurized and starts falling through the sky. You're like, oh my God, what have we done?
Oh my God.
We should have driven, even though it's 8 hours. And they built this because there were no, it was literally the middle of nowhere. And so they made this clearing in a forest, and they put up about 300 tents, and they built a few little wooden houses, and all of the crew just sort of moved there for filming. And we were, working with real tigers, and I had scenes with real baby tigers, and it just felt...
Was it frightening?
Not at all. It just felt so surreal and magical. And we filmed in Siem Reap in Angkor Wat, and they closed down part of it so we could film. It was, even at that age, I think I just realized how lucky I was to be able to be there. I think I was 10. I think I was just finishing primary school.
So that was
10,
one
11.
of the first things that you ever did?
Yes. Yeah, I think that was after Finding Neverland and before Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Because there was quite a big, long time between it, even though they were released quite soon after each other, weren't there? But you had a few years between the two.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I can't even remember. I know I read it, that there was a reason for the delay.
I think it was something to do with... I know, now I feel like I'm getting so old and my memory's so bad from whatever this was, but I think there was a different Peter Pan film that had the rights. And because there was an element of Finding Neverland that incorporated the play, then they had this right to say you can't put it out for another year or so after the other film that had Peter Pan in it. It was something.
Well, I'm very glad they put it out. And actually, I watched it the other day, and that scene on the bench is just so amazing.
Oh, thank you.
It really is wonderful. And Johnny Depp was wonderful and you were absolutely fantastic. Did he choose you for Charlie?
I'm sure there must have been some sort of, I was probably too young to realise, but I'm sure that had something to do with it.
No, it's so good. And obviously I remember the original Charlie in the Chocolate Factory as well, but my son and all his friends, the one that they always talk about is your one. Oh. So yeah, wonderful. Loved it.
Thank you so much.
So what's your most overrated or underrated travel?
I mean, overrated, it's always you always feel a bit mean.
I know, it is quite hard to say.
However, I'd say different to what expectations were, maybe, to take the edge off it a little bit, is Whistler, I would say, outside Vancouver. I never skied because I wasn't allowed to ski filming in case I come back on Monday morning with a broken leg and they're like, what have you done? And so you go up to Whistler and people would say, oh, the village is very quaint. And to me, if you're expecting a quaint village, I wouldn't go to Whistler. If you're going to ski or to like do these kind of, the scenery is spectacular, but I think I always gravitate towards, if you're going to the wilderness, try and like get out there in the middle of nowhere as much as possible, as opposed to a quite modern village that's got stuff that feels quite familiar. Yeah. So I would say, if you're into all your outdoor sports and activities, then great. Otherwise, maybe choose somewhere else.
Or if you want a quaint skiing thing, go to Switzerland.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's not quite the same. Although people who are skiers love it. They say it's amazing.
They do. And there is a really nice sort of outdoor spa called the Scandinave Spa that's just maybe 5 minutes down the road from Whistler, where I have been. It's beautiful. Now I'm like, Whistler's the most underrated place. But you can go, you do your sort of cold dip and, cycle through the sauna and the steam room, and all of it's outside. And especially on a snowy winter's day when you're in the mountains, it's amazing.
And what's the underrated one?
The underrated experience rather than place is fishing, which I don't know whether you've ever fished. It never appealed to me at all. I was like, absolutely not. Like, it seems incredibly dull. I need to be 3 times as old as I am in order to get out there and enjoy fishing. However, of course, being in British Columbia, a friend of mine, Max, was like, you should come and try salmon fishing. And I just really loved it. I became sort of, it's quite addictive. And I think what it is that it's not about even keeping the fish, you can just put them back. But just being out there with a very simple task in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly hours and hours go by. And I think if you went out in a boat and sort of bobbled around for 3 hours, by the end you'd think, well, maybe we should be going on and doing something else. But something just about sitting there with a simple task that sort of preoccupies you but doesn't really, was actually much better than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, how interesting. Have you ever been fishing in Scotland?
No, I haven't. This is my only experience. So
maybe you need to be doing salmon fishing in Scotland next or something, but in waders, when you wade out. I do understand that what people say, though. It doesn't really appeal to me, but I think that tranquility and just being at one with nature, and as you say, you put the fish back anyway, so it's not even about that. I think that's very good for the soul. Yes, exactly. And I think there's an appreciation of it, especially in this day and age. And, I enjoy eating salmon, but at the same time, it just makes you aware of the repercussions of that. And, you're also, when you're fishing and suddenly these orca go by, and you obviously just stop and just embrace this majestic animal that, it's amazing. Which takes us beautifully onto food and drink. What do you like eating? Where do you like eating? Where's your best meal been? Or let's just talk about travel and food and drink. So one that comes to mind, which I was lucky to go to last year when filming in Greece, I had about a week and a half off and went to Santorini. I'd never been to any of these places before, in any of the Greek islands. I went to Santorini and then Sifnos and Milos and Folegandros. And there was this place in Sifnos that was called Cantina. And it was just
in this, just outside of this old town called Castra. I guess it's more of a village really, right down by the water. And so you can't get there by car. It's an old fisherman's hut that's been converted into essentially just a kitchen, and then you have to just sit outside. And you're down by the water. You go down this kind of long cobbled lane to get there, and it's just the most beautiful atmosphere. It feels so timeless, and the fish was just amazing. And then a nice sort of white Assoritico from Santorini. It was honestly blissful, and so delicious. Simple, but just done so well. Yeah.
So good. I love Greek food anyway. I mean, fresh fish, but then also the feta and the salads and all of those things are just fantastic, aren't they? Did you love Greece?
I did. Yeah. It was it was very, very special. And getting to go to all those islands was, in fact, it was good to go to Cantina, because then you have to walk all the way back up to the top again. So you feel like you've earned it. And then there's a couple of bars at the top of the hill. One's called Loggia, and then there's another called Cavos Sunrise, which is this old guy who isn't Cuban but fancies himself as a Cuban revolutionary. And so you can, you feel like you've earned another drink by the time you get back
and
up there.
Hopefully not ouzo or Metaxa brandy, which are
it's
killers.
Only rum in Cavos Sunrise. He's like a pure rum. It feels like you're in a different era.
Perfect. So what is your top travel tip?
I'd say my top travel tip is to try and enjoy the journey as much as the destination. That sounds so corny, doesn't it?
But it's so good. It's so true.
But I do think that sometimes we get so used to the traveling aspect of travel, and it's about getting to where we want to be. And I think there's a few instances where I've felt this. One, certainly in Vancouver and British Columbia, where they have these seaplanes, and I was saying the ferries, and rather than it being just a sort of means to an end, you drive on, you park your car, and then you can go up to the deck and just look around, and you're traveling through this most beautiful scenery for 45 minutes. Yeah. Similarly with a seaplane, it's just, people pay to just do a tour of Vancouver in a seaplane, but you get to go to the Sunshine Coast or go to Vancouver Island, over to Tofino in it. And even just a plane, if you can get a window seat and you're just looking out and seeing these spectacular vistas go by that sometimes you miss and you forget as the window blind is down, that actually out there's something amazing, and you're flying over the Grand Canyon, or you're flying over who knows where. Yeah.
And tell me about Cuba.
Yes, Cuba. It's so different to any other holiday I've been on. It was probably the holiday that cost the least, but is sort of my fondest memory. My now wife and I went maybe 10 years ago now or something, a long time ago. And we didn't have a plan at all, which I think is another little tip. We just got there and we were staying with families, and you just got to one and you rang up using the landline because there was no Wi-Fi around the island when we were there, and they'd say, oh yeah, you can stay with my friend at this next place, and you'd sort of rent rooms from people and just go as you went, and you
so
sort of ring
recommended
them up
by the people that you were staying with
exactly.
previously.
And there was one we stayed with this sort of tobacco farmer in Viñales that was relatively near to, we managed to do the kind of whole island, but yeah, this one place was just, it was amazing. And you sort of woken up with warm milk, not because it was off, but because it had just come fresh really? That morning. And you just sort of sit there in this beautiful setting and very unadorned with the loveliest people, and just, being able to speak the language. It was
yes,
very,
because you
very
speak
lucky.
Spanish, don't you?
Yes.
Freddie Fox was on the podcast, and he absolutely loves Cuba, and he had like a diary agenda where he'd put all the photographs and all the things, and he said it was just magical. Yeah. And he kept on saying, go to Cuba before it's too late.
Yes, I guess there was probably an element of that. My other thing that just looking back at that, I feel it's probably the only place in some ways that I don't want to go back to, just because it was such a perfect time and a perfect memory that you almost feel it will never live up to what it was to you before. And so in some ways, it's sort of the only place that you just almost will never want to go back to because it will never be the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And sometimes that is part of travel. It's keeping hold of those memories that are so special in your heart. And you don't need to go back time and time again. I mean, I like going back to the same place for a holiday, but I think I'm lucky that I travel so much that I go to various other places, so I don't have to go back all the time to those. Let's go on to your most poignant memory.
I would say one of the first sort of trips that I really remember doing as a kid was going to Barcelona with my family, and it was for my birthday. And I wanted to be a footballer. I was obsessed with Rivaldo. I wanted to play for Barcelona. And I had also got the, what were they called? Where you could teach yourself the language and on the CD.
Yes.
And so I'd done that at home on my own. And so my parents were okay, we can go to Barcelona. And so we went, and I did manage to see a little bit of the city and also go to a Barcelona game. But the first day I had paella and uttered, which has now gone down in sort of history, family folklore, the infamous words, "I was born to be Spanish." The next morning woke up completely ill, having had the very bad prawns, and was sick for the entire trip. But I did manage to go to the game.
Oh,
but yeah.
That's hysterical. And then you went to Madrid as part of your year at Cambridge,
My year abroad,
you?
yeah. So I did a full year in Madrid, which is a brilliant city. I just think in some ways, I think Madrid's underrated, actually, because yes, it's a capital, but it somehow doesn't get the same attention as other Spanish cities. And I think it's just this amazing mix of old Spain, of a sort of traditional Spain that is relatively recent in their history, at a time when Franco was in power. But at the same time, it's incredibly modern, and it's sort of at the forefront of so much of Spain and change and La Movida. And there's just it's that kind of dichotomy that's still there that I find fascinating. There's a lovely hotel called the Santa Mauro.
It's my favorite hotel in Madrid.
It's brilliant. And it's just outside the center, but you can walk in. You're tucked away in a quiet little area, but not too far removed, and it's just so elegant and so lovely.
That's exactly where I would tell people to stay. I did my 72 hours in Madrid recently on my Instagram, and I said stay at the Santa Mauro, and then all the different things to do. But the thing that I got most direct messages about was the tapas bar I told people to go to, where the owner is obsessed with Julio Iglesias. Everything is Julio, and then he starts karaoke and everyone sings it. I tell you, more people have gone to that tapas bar afterwards. It was hilarious.
That is
so funny. Forget the Prado.
Yeah.
They were all going there.
Yeah, exactly.
So funny.
And also just from Madrid, you can explore on the AVE, on the really quick train, so much of Spain, including Cordoba, where I think is my favorite building in Spain, is the sort of mosque cathedral mashup, I guess, for lack of a better word, which is just, again, I think, it's just the way that it represents, for those who don't know of it, it was originally, when the Moors were in Spain, in Cordoba, which was this huge city, especially huge at the time. It was this big mosque. And then during the Reconquista, when the sort of Catholic kings took back the country, they chopped out, it's so hard to describe, but they kind of took out the middle of this mosque and built a cathedral. And so you walk in and it feels like you've entered this mosque, and you keep going through all of these different arches, and it's beautiful. And then suddenly you realize that you've entered this central space that is now a cathedral. And it's absolutely extraordinary.
I've never been to Cordoba. I've been to Sevilla and I've been to Granada, which both I love, but I've never been to Cordoba.
Next
it's
time.
on my list, absolutely. And there's a wonderful hotel south of Madrid, in the vineyards, called Abadia Retuerta, which is an old monastery.
Oh, it
and it is
amazing.
Absolutely beautiful. And it's so easy to get to on the train. I think it's 3 hours drive, but on the train it's only an hour, and it's absolutely wonderful. So if you go back, you must try that out.
On the list.
Absolutely. Do that. And during your year out, did you go to, you did Arabic as well. Did you go and study that somewhere abroad as well?
Unfortunately not. I never got the chance. It was my year abroad, given that, I mean, I'm not that old, but it was a while ago when it was a good, maybe like 13 years ago. And it was during the time of the Arab Spring.
Okay.
And so the university had to give you permission to go to whatever country you were choosing to go to. And the options were quite limited. So I ended up just focusing on the Spanish.
And do you speak Arabic?
No, it's sort of fallen by the wayside. But my Spanish is my
perfect.
Spanish and French. I've kept that up
And
from
when
school.
you went to Greece, because you're a linguist, did you pick a little bit of Greek up when you were there?
No, I think that I'm unfortunately, other than the very basics.
Kalimera, Kalispera.
I learned the alphabet. That felt like a necessity.
Oh, that's very good.
Well, I think just because you started to like need it, it was
So that
it was
you could
odd
actually
to
understand.
feel. Yeah, it was odd. I think being in a European country where you expect to be able to look up and read a sign, and you'd look up and you think, well, I have no idea what this road is called because all of them they're in a different alphabet. And so then I felt the need to learn that.
That's amazing. There's none of that putting a photograph on ChatGPT or whatever and it telling you.
I should have.
No,
just done that, shouldn't I?
learn the alphabet. Much, much better. I asked you to bring a photograph.
Yes.
Can you show us the photograph and can you describe the photograph and tell us why you've chosen that photograph?
I'm not quite sure why. In my head now, I'm still thinking I should choose another photograph, but at this point, I've committed to bringing this one. So I'm going to show you this photograph, and it's definitely not the sort of photograph that I imagine most people will bring along, but there was a reason for it. So this is the photograph.
Okay. Well, tell me about the photograph.
So the photograph is the back. It's a car, a rental car that I had at the time, in the back of a ferry in Vancouver. And it's the last one allowed on. And this was the last ferry that night. And so, there's a barrier right behind the car and you sort of go down a drawbridge in order to board these ferries. And we were on the drawbridge and they were like, no, you've got to go back. There's no space. And then other people were like, no, you can come. Like, we'll sneak you in. And so everyone sort of inched forward and we were literally the last one on and would have otherwise had to go back the next day. And I guess the reason that I chose it, other than the obvious love for Vancouver and ferry travel generally, is I just think the idea that those little things going right can mean so much whenever you travel. And it's the stuff that sometimes you just can't plan that ends up being this big win. And it was such a celebration when we got on the ferry.
You were so happy?
Yeah. And I think, but also it could have gone so differently and you could have gone down a whole other path and maybe that would have been magical too. But it just
the
sliding doors. And it reminded me of that when traveling, that as much as you have a plan, sometimes things will go wrong and they will go a bit differently, but that's just sort of to be embraced and part of the joy of traveling.
I love that. That's such a wonderful philosophy. I actually thought you were going to say it was the last episode of The Good Doctor and I didn't get there or something like that. But no, it's a much nicer, poignant story. So before I let you go, where are you going next and what's next for Freddie Highmore in the world of acting?
So it's been really nice to be back this side of the world. I think it's clear from this that I've enjoyed my time in North America, but at the same time, getting to come back home and sort of do more things over here and travel more in Europe. I find myself, I sort of catch myself as like a North American who's like arrived in Europe saying it's so close. All of these places are so accessible. And now I always sort of laugh at them before. And now I've become one of them because you do appreciate how accessible you can. I'm stating the obvious, but you can jump on a train and then you're in France, and those things that are so far away when you're not in Europe and so hard to imagine. And so I'm just looking forward to kind of getting to explore a little bit more of Europe and as much as possible.
And what about acting? What are you doing next?
I'm working on something at the moment. I'm writing something which I can't unfortunately speak about, but it is exciting to be doing.
So anyway. You're starting to do more on writing and producing as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I was lucky on The Good Doctor and Bates Motel to kind of be involved in the wider process and sort of directed and wrote and produced and just really enjoy that and want to try and do more of that.
Well, we all look forward to seeing you in The Assassin. Can't wait. And to seeing things that you've written and produced. How exciting. And any help you need in Europe, you know who to call.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.